Good afternoon.
Allow us to also convey our sincere condolences to you, Mr. Ilukena.
Thank you very much. And I would like to do the same to the Namibian nation and my colleagues who were once students at the United Nations Institute for Namibia. I know there are so many of us, and I think whatever I'm going to say, they will also be in agreement with me. So I convey my condolences to them also.
Thank you, sir. Let's take a slight step back. Where were you and under what circumstances did you learn of this devastating news last week Sunday?
Well, unfortunately, we on Friday before Sunday, I came with a delegation from the Namibia Traditional Authority to come and meet the governor of Zambezi region on an issue that we wanted discussed. And during our meeting, the governor conveyed his message to us, indicating that His Excellency is fine, though he's in hospital, he's not feeling well, and he reminded us to remember him in our prayers. And we were all hopeful that he will be able to recover. Unfortunately, Sunday early morning hours, I was awoken by a call from a colleague of mine who wanted to know as to whether I've received this news, which I was really surprised to hear, because we were all hopeful that whatever it was, that he will be able to pull through. He's a fighter, and we thought he was going to overcome this one. So it was a shock when I heard it that Sunday, early morning hours, and I never even went back to sleep because I was still a bit confused. And I couldn't believe it either.
Now, following the news, how have you dealt with the shock thus far? Have you been able to process it?
Well, it took a while. Like on Sunday, I still wanted to gather more information because it was tough to believe that it has actually happened. I only got to accept after His Excellency, the then Vice President, a statement was issued confirming what we heard in the early morning hours. And that left me with no doubt in my mind, but to accept that indeed this has happened.
Mr. Ilukena, I would like you to take us back to your time at the United Nations Institute for Namibia and your experience journeying along the late President Geingob.
Thank you very much. Let me first start by making a general remark. First, because I'm doing so on the basis that in remembering him, I may have to touch on names of some of our comrades that have already departed, and I would like to pay tribute to them also, as I mentioned their names in my intervention here, because there are a number of them that are no more with us. But also to say thank you to SWAPO, because they had the foresight to understand that an independent Namibia will require an educated cadre of comrades that will be able to run the affairs of the country. And so fighting to have an institute established that can train Namibians, I think that was a good foresight on the leadership of SWAPO. But also to say thank you to SWAPO, because when they made the choice as to who is going to be heading the institution, that choice fell on His Excellency, late Comrade Hage Geingob, who led us for the years that we spent at the United Nations Institute for Namibia. We are saying thank you to SWAPO for assigning him that task, because he provided wonderful leadership as well as a house for all of us, irrespective of where you came from, which part of Namibia you came from. Once you are in the institute, you felt we were a community that needed to bond together and support each other in everything that we did. So for me, as from 1977, That's when I arrived at the United Nations Institute for Namibia. Remember, it was opened in 1976. That's when it received its first cadre, and then 77, and thereafter enrollments were every year. But to be fair, I think at the United Nations Institute for Namibia, first to convince the young people that left this country in the 70s and so on, that you need to go to school. For most of us, it was tough because when we were leaving this country, we were not going, it wasn't to go to school. We were leaving to go and fight for the liberation of our country. And so at one point when you hear your commander or whatever saying, apparently, you have to now leave for school because you have been identified to go and do A, B, C, D. It wasn't easy because most of us felt education is not one way to liberate the country. We felt it's only through the barrel of the gun. So the leadership of SWAPO and those that were assigned in the various institutions, it was a tough time to convince us, but finally, when we accepted, we realized that the explanations were in order because the emphasis was on to say the liberation war is fought on three fronts. You have the military, which most of us wanted to be in or were in, and then you have the diplomatic front, where we needed to sell the cause of Namibia and as to why we are fighting for the liberation of our country. Then you have the academic front, because once the country is independent, it will need people that will run it, people that understand, that can draft the policies and everything.
Are you there, Mr. Ilukena?
When they opened the United Nations Institute for Namibia. Yes?
We're listening to you, sir.
Yes. So for 1977, when we arrived at the Institute, I think for most of us, I was in the area of education, and the late first Speaker of the National Assembly, Dr. Moseji Tendero, was the one who was heading education. I still remember Dr. Ngarikutuke Chiriange, who was heading the law, together with Judge Parker, who is currently in Namibia. He is a Ghanaian, but joined the Institute way back, and we came with him after independence. Then you had the late Hidipo Hamtenya, who was in the political science department. You had people like the late Joseph Ita, who was Joseph Itana, who was the registrar at the institute. You had people like the late Kaulinge, who was in the economics department. You also had, I remember, we had the late Yambo, not Dr. Yambo after independence, but the late Yambo, who was heading the agricultural section. And I still can remember we also had a clinic there, and Mrs. Munjwa was the one who was running the clinic, which was part of to take care of our health. And there are many others that worked with them. So the late President Hage Geingob had a formidable team that he was working with to prepare us as young people to ensure that once Namibia becomes independent, there is capacity to be able to administer and run the affairs of the country. Among those who graduated from the Institute, that probably people will still remember because they are in high positions, you have the current Chief Justice Shivute, was one of those students. I know it's a group that came after us. You have the Deputy Chief Justice, Mr. Damaseb, Comrade Damaseb. Then the Dr. Kawanas and many, many others. We are all products of the United Nations Institute for Namibia. In other words, we view the Institute as the place that prepared us for our tertiary education that followed thereafter. So for most of us, those who were lucky, after completing the United Nations Institute for Namibia, then we were able, after some few years, to go and continue our studies elsewhere. So we look at the late Hage, Dr. Hage Geingob, His Excellency Dr. Hage Geingob, almost like our father, the pillar, the mentor, the guider, the person who provided the way forward for us as young people when he was heading the United Nations Institute for Namibia together with his team. So we thank them for what they were able to do for us, and we thank them for continuing to support us. But for His Excellence, I think it was rewarding and refreshing after independence, once the Constituent Assembly had been completed, has drafted the Constitution on the 21st of March 1990, independence is declared, and His Excellency, the late Comrade Hage Geingob, becomes the first Prime Minister. Then you look at the team that supported him in trying to form the government of the day. Most of these young people, including ourselves, that's when we were brought in slowly to come and take over. Now, remember that at that time, immediately after independence, we were faced with a challenge because among those, what South African government did was that they seconded some civil servants from South Africa. So at the time of independence, those institutions that existed in Namibia were still being run by South African seconded civil servants. So it was difficult for us, for the government of the day, to bring in new people that are coming from elsewhere. But being resilient and tactical in his approach, the Prime Minister was able to negotiate, navigate that tricky aspect of how do you have a civil service seconded from another country to run the affairs of your country when you have formed a government. So slowly we were brought in as we were phasing out those seconded civil servants of South Africa. And since then we look back and we are saying the way the Prime Minister handled that transitional phase to ensure that all government institutions eventually they were filled with Namibians without necessarily creating a vacuum. I think that was wonderful. So for most of us, we look at that experience and we thank him for navigating that tricky part of our transition. Secondly, as President, remember that this is when we are talking about the Harambee Prosperity Plan. For Harambee, you know, we always say it's a slogan that started way back in East Africa, and to be specific, Kenya. And I know it was coined by Mzee Jomo Kenyatta at the time of independence. But he came up with that slogan to try and pull everybody together, because Harambee is to pull together, hold hands, move in the same direction to achieve a common purpose. So when you hear the Harambee Prosperity Plan, for most of us, it's a calling that says we need to pull together, we need to work together, because it's only in unity that we are able to achieve what we want to achieve. Clearly, when you look at the Harambee Plan, you will see the plan is divided in pillars.
Mr. Ilukena,
which again, if you...
Perhaps before we get into the particulars of the Harambee Prosperity Plan, I would just like us to return briefly to Lusaka. You described him during his time as having headed the institution as a mentor, as a father, as a pillar. Is there one specific memory of your time having joined the school in 1977 that stands out for you to this day?
Yeah, no, one aspect that stands out for me is the one that I made reference to, where we were being told to liberate a country does not necessarily mean all of us should be at the war front. Because once you have liberated the country, what do you do then? This was his job, to try and convince us as young people. Because remember, when we went there, the list of our worries was education. We wanted to fight. So to withdraw a soldier, you have completed your military training, you are deployed, you have fought for some months, for some years, to be told now you leave your gun, go back and study. That was a challenge, because most of us could not understand it. That's not what I went there for. So convincing us, when I look back, and I'll say to myself, if we had not had a concerted leadership that was visionary, that was able to see tomorrow before you wake up, then most of us wouldn't be what we became after independence. So that advice that he kept driving, every time we have meetings, he will keep reminding us to say, Namibia will need you once it becomes independent. Here where you have come is an institution of learning, but consider it, take it as your battlefront. So you are fighting. You are not a school, this is a war, you are fighting. So linking up the academic to the battlefield to convince us that even academically you are fighting. So we felt indeed this was another front. So we started considering, you have the military front, you have the academic front, you have the diplomatic front. So to us, those were all fronts. So we thank him as our father who was guiding us at that point in time to really try and shape us to understand that we needed that path in order for us to be able to run our country once independence has been achieved.
Very well. So as
but also,
Mr. Ilukena, as we return
yes,
to your reference to the Harambee Prosperity Plan, you reminded us that it is a Swahili word that means to pull in the same direction. How significant was that, bearing in mind that the late president was also a bridge builder, although he received some criticism at the time that the name for this prosperity plan was announced?
Well, in my view, I think it was a well thought out plan. Like I was indicating, if you look at the pillars, literally when you look at the prosperity plan and you think of Namibian house and no one should be left behind, you look at those two, the plan itself with the pillars is telling you it's like somebody who is building a house. That's why at the end, even if you see the shape like a triangle, it's signifying putting a roof and you have a complete house. So for me, as a civil servant who was implementing the plan, I understood it to mean this is our house that we are building. These are the pillars. If the pillars are not strong enough, this house is not going to stand. So whereas others may have seen other aspects that are weak, that needed to be improved, in my view, everything that you start, there will always be some areas that are left for improvement. But somebody has to come up with the idea. And we needed something that guides us as a nation. And that's the plan that was put forward. And we all worked towards achieving what was in the plan. So those who may have different interpretations, they are entitled to that. But they are criticizing something that exists. So when you criticize, you are helping to strengthen. You are not only looking for weaknesses, but you should also come up with suggestions to improve on what you have come up with. So that would be my take. And I'm very happy that I was able to contribute in my small way when I was still a civil servant to the achievement of those pillars. And I would want to believe anything that you build, it's one brick at a time. And eventually the idea was that by the end of 10 years of tenure of His Excellency, heading the plan, we would have completed the house. And up to until now, I have no doubt that some of those fundamentals that he laid down, the current leadership that is taking over, they will continue to build those bricks, indeed, if possible, to put the roofing, so that indeed at the end of 2024, by the time we pass on the torch to the new president after 2025, the house will have been completed.
Any final thoughts before we let you go, Mr. Ilukena?
Just to say, the final one is to say, one of the principles that we were also able to learn and accept when we were at the Institute is the fact that we all came from all parts of Namibia. To those that were in exile from all different regions of Namibia. And we were told this is a place where if you come in, this is where tribalism does not exist. When we come here, we are all Namibians first. Then we will have our tribes where we come from, but it's one Namibia, one nation. When you walk the corridors of the United Nations Institute for Namibia, you will hear different languages being spoken, almost a reflection of Namibia. But when you find us together, there's one common language that we are communicating with. And we all bonded together as brothers and sisters. We all assisted each other as brothers and sisters because we understood that this was a formation of a nation, that we were the Namibia of tomorrow. And we needed to start then, just like everything that we were doing in our camps. So today, when I look back at that experience, it gave me the opportunity to interact with Namibians that I never knew existed elsewhere before I left for exile. My Namibia before exile was at the border between Namibia, between Zambezi and Kavango. I didn't know anything about Windhoek. I didn't know anything about the Namas, the Hereros, the Damaras, and what have you. So all these groups, I met them in exile. They opened my eyes to realize that the country we are talking about is bigger than where I come from. And that for us to do something, we needed to come together. And that is because we got a leadership that was able to guide us, to tell us the purpose, why we are there, and what we need to achieve. So we are very thankful to what we have been able to achieve, very thankful for the seeds that the United Nations Institute for Namibia laid, very thankful to our fathers who were in the leadership of SWAPO for having thought of this institution, thankful to His Excellency, the late President Hage Geingob, who was assigned a very difficult task, but performed it with excellency. As he goes to rest, we are saying your dreams, your aspirations, your trials and tribulations, they remain with us. You set an example for us, and it's our hope that we'll be able to walk the walk, and that wherever you are, you will be able to look down and be happy to know that your efforts did not go to waste, but that your contributions to building a nation is indeed being achieved. At this point, please, if you allow me, I would rather say, may his soul rest in eternal